centuries. And at that time, Nubia was also a very prominent kingdom, and it was Christian. And there are actually, I just straight up learned this. So this is hot off the press on this podcast. And it might be new to a lot of people. It's definitely new to me. I just learned that there's actually evidence of crosses that were in the Ife kingdom in the 11th and 12th century, like even before, long before Europeans came to Nigeria.
Not having to change your culture when Christianity is brought to you, because my parents are from Nigeria and the British colonized them. They brought over Christianity during that time. And from just watching how my parents live and the way that I live, and my grandmother, she never rejected her culture at all. She was steeped in Nigerian Igbo culture. Even as to when we go out to these Igbo parties, I tried to wear American clothes. She was like, no, you need to wear your African traditional clothes. And this was early 2007, like 2007, 2008, when I was in like middle school. And when she was saying this at the time, it wasn't a real popular thing to embrace to embrace being African, or to be embrace being from Africa. So that's why I want to talk about some of the church fathers. How did some of the African church fathers impact Christianity as we know it today?
That's a great question. I would say that, and this is something I mentioned, a lot of is, I think that it's important to really look at, early African Christianity in its own kind of situation and in its own standing, because this is something that I really like to encourage a lot of, especially Black Christians, whether they're African American or Nigerian or, British or, from the Caribbean, wherever, from Africa. There's a lot of us that are interested in early African Christianity. But also there have been a lot of people, even books that have been written where the focus is trying to understand how the early church theologians in Africa affected the Western church, or how it shaped Western Christianity. And I have to push on that just a little bit to say that, as I mentioned, I think it's important to understand African Christianity in its own right, and not only how it affected the broader church or how it affected the Western church, because then that can, make us think that, well, early Africans were important because they influenced Western people. I'm like, well, actually, there was a lot of African Christianity that did not influence Western Christianity, because Western Christianity actually suppressed a lot of the African Christianity, the majority of it, really. And it had its own history that in many ways continued to grow and continue to spread in Africa, even despite European Christians' attempt to suppress it. In fact, you mentioned being from Nigeria, and I'm learning things all the time, and it's crazy. I actually just learned that there were actually connections between one of the earliest civilizations in Nigeria and with Nubia. Now, Nubia was a Christian nation from the 500s all the way up into the 1500s. So like for 1,000 years. And one of the earliest civilizations in Nigeria were called the Ife kingdom. And the Ife kingdom was really prominent in the 12th and 13th and 14th centuries. And at that time, Nubia was also a very prominent kingdom, and it was Christian. And there are actually, I just straight up learned this. So this is hot off the press on this podcast. And it might be new to a lot of people. It's definitely new to me. I just learned that there's actually evidence of crosses that were in the Ife kingdom in the 11th and 12th century, like even before, long before Europeans came to Nigeria, because I've been told that in Nigeria and in many other places in Africa, it's still oftentimes a perception that people will have in various parts of Africa that Christianity came from Europe into Africa, especially in West Africa, right? And so I think it's very powerful to realize that actually Christianity was touching and was spreading in even Nigeria, in the Ife kingdom. And I've posted, and I'm doing some scholarship on even in the Mali kingdom, further north and further west from the Ife kingdom, but in the same time period, that there were Christians there as well. So there were already Christians in even West Africa long before the Europeans showed up. And that